This is episode 35 of the Progression Health podcast. I'm here with online coach Shane Storey, and Shane is a powerlifter and bodybuilder. Do you want to introduce yourself, Shane?
Thanks for having me on, Ross. So the name Shane Storey. I work as an online coach with Triage method. So that's an online coaching company. We're based in Ireland, but obviously we're online, so we work with people all over the world. I am also tested IPF powerlifter, as well as a natural bodybuilder. Well, soon to be bodybuilder. I'm competing in my first competition in 4 weeks' time. So been a bit of a transition over the last while in terms of, who I help. A lot of my clients are like late beginners, early intermediates, people who have essentially tanked out their progress that they can make on their own without making further poor decisions on their part, like program hopping, time wasting. So I essentially come in and try to help them make better decisions and kind of keep them on the path towards their kind of overall training goals. So ideally, my ideal client, the main people I help are people in that scenario who are into strength training, into physique development, but I don't just kind of specialize in that niche. Like, of course, I do still have a lot of fat loss clients, people just generally looking to improve their lifestyle, because one of the kind of things we try to do at Triage is we try to get people to create a life that includes like fitness and nutrition, as opposed to create their life around it.
Yeah, kind of make that lifestyle change. Your initial motivation, what got you started way back when?
It goes back to when I was a wee lad, I suppose. So my mum thankfully got me into sports at a very young age. So I think I first started playing any kind of sport when I was like 6. Started playing badminton, of all things. Like, the community I grew up in Meath had a big badminton club, badminton community. So I was playing that pretty competitively, I suppose, up until maybe my 3rd year in school. And along that kind of way, as I got into secondary school, like, we were in a very sports focused college, Gormston College in Meath, and it was a half boarding school, so I stayed in school until 7:30 every day, and a huge portion of that kind of time after the class finished at 3 was just you have free time here, so you're going to play sports. So pretty much got to dip my toes into all sports when I was there. I played most of them: tennis, basketball, Gaelic, soccer, rugby. But the ones that kind of stuck out to me the most were Gaelic and rugby. So obviously with those sports, there's a good deal of physicality involved. And I was playing midfield for Gaelic. I was playing back row for rugby. So again, further physicality needed there. And as you're getting to your later teen years as well, you want to impress the girls. So getting a little bit stronger, getting a little bit more muscle seems like a good idea. As well as it will help with, progressing your progression in the sports. So I basically just didn't know what else to do and started doing push-ups and sit-ups every night for about half an hour before I go to bed. Parents probably thought I was nuts. But, I did that for, maybe a year and a half. And then we got access to the school gym when I was in 4th year. And then since then, I've been pretty much going to the gym relatively consistently. So since I was about 16, and thankfully while I was there was a guy that looked over us, so we weren't messing too much during that kind of period between class and study in the evening time. And he kind of showed me a lot of ropes in terms of how to set up a training program, how to train hard, most importantly. And yeah, just from there, I suppose it's been a kind of ever-evolving journey in terms of learning more about training, learning more about nutrition, progressing myself, and now progressing my clients.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's some story. I used to play badminton a lot as well when I was younger, actually. It's a great sport for just having general fitness and stuff as well.
Yeah. That agility.
Absolutely, yeah. I lost every bit of it there, and I was playing 2 weeks ago, and I was reaching over for a drop shot, and I ended up diving across the court, and everyone just looking at me like, what is wrong with this fella? But yeah, that's just rust. But so currently now you're still working out. So what did you get from working out, doing the push-ups and the sit-ups and stuff like that?
The Progression Health podcast has teamed up with TRX. So TRX is a bodyweight training piece of equipment that you can hook up anywhere, anytime. And I highly recommend it. I use it in every session with my clients. I use it to warm up and also for stretching. But if you are traveling, which is where I recommend everyone use it, it's hard to get to a gym. It's hard to find the time. But you could literally work out from your hotel room with the TRX and the door attachment that it has, where it doesn't damage the door, but it gives you an effective workout. I also like to add in other things like glute bands and resistance bands. But once you have the TRX, then you can figure all that out. So get yourself 50% off on the TRX home workout equipment with the code Progression Health TRX and boost your workout effectiveness and consistency. Progression Health podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an online therapy service which will help you to more effectively manage your mental health. Mental health is very important, and it's something that all of us are realizing now, especially after the pandemic. During the pandemic, for me especially, it was very challenging, and I reached out to BetterHelp. I tried out a few of their licensed therapists, settled on one for the majority of the pandemic, and I found the help that I received invaluable. And the great thing also is that you can speak to your therapist outside of sessions. If it's not working out, you can switch. Very affordable. It's really easy to use also. And if someone hasn't tried therapy before, but you're kind of, you're curious, I would highly recommend BetterHelp. So what we've done is we've got a sign up link I'll attach in the show notes, and basically you can get a discount to get started and start improving your mental health today. So BetterHelp for better mental health.
At home, like what was sort of mentally, what was the benefit you were getting to keep you training since you're like 16? So like, what's that, like 6 years or so?
I'm 28 now.
28, damn, so I'm way off.
Yeah,
the way training's keeping you young.
Yeah, exactly. Thank God. I suppose it is the elixir review. What's been a motivation to keep me going? I suppose it's always been something that's kind of given me a little bit of structure in my day. Like even on days where I have to take rest days these days, there's still a big portion in the day there that's not being filled by the usual routine. So that's definitely one aspect that I have always enjoyed about it. But generally when, I'm training, everything else in life kind of falls into place. So obviously throughout that entire period, I would have went to university after school, and like most people when they go to university, and probably 80% of my time drinking and 20% of my time in classes. But training was somewhat there. It wasn't necessarily the best of trainings. It wasn't necessarily the most thought out trainings. Wasn't making the most of progress. Probably wasn't making the most of my early years, but it was still there. And it was because it kind of gave me that structure, and it kind of, because I was training, I kind of wanted to eat somewhat better. I kind of wanted to get some amount of sleep. It probably helped, I'm sure, keep my head intact when I was doing all of that drinking in college too. And I suppose since when I really started to take it seriously, it kind of came at a point when I was about to finish up university, and I wasn't really sure what type of direction that my kind of life was going to change post university, because I wasn't really too interested in my degree. And that was something that I always thought was something that had been constant since I was very young. So I wanted to learn a bit more about it, because while I had been training for such a long period up until that point, I hadn't necessarily got the physique of people that I would have looked up to at all. I wouldn't have had too much. I would have known eating was important, of course, right? But probably wouldn't have been the best of nutrition. I remember actually when I discovered that you're meant to get 2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. And one of my friends, he was working in Manhattan Peanut Factory, and he brought back a box of Manhattan peanuts. And I shit you not, I probably had about 150 to 160 grams worth of protein from peanuts, over the course of a few days, consistently. So you can imagine the calorie intake.
You're on a serious bulk there, yeah.
So there was just kind of small things like that when I started to look into it a little bit more, because the kind of year that I kind of had this epiphany, I was on Erasmus, so I was probably doing a little bit more enjoying myself than anything else, and I wasn't the best student, so I wasn't going too much class, but I was reading a lot of Lyle McDonald. I was reading I was watching 3DMJ on YouTube. I was reading Alan
You're meant to say Triage as well.
Yeah, Triage as well. Yeah, well, I don't know Triage were back then, but yeah, I started following a lot of those people. I discovered Danny Lennon very early on, thankfully, and then just through kind of watching and like consuming all that content, I was like, I'm actually really interested in this, so I might be able to see something kind of coming out of this in terms of career. And then I got a lot of kind of encouragement from my friends when I started to get good physical results from the training I was doing, from the education I was doing, them getting information from me and them seeing results. So yeah, it's hard to really know what the kind of main kind of drive underlying it all was, other than initially giving me that structure, and then that kind of structure being able to turn into somewhat of having like a purpose day to day and kind of carrying on that purpose now.
Because I think when you're young, you want to like achieve things, you want to do things and make something yourself. So that structure, there's a bit of achievement in it, I think, just having like that, okay, I got my one session or my 4 sessions done for the week or whatever. So there's something to be said for that structure. And just, you're talking about getting like results in the gym and people noticing and stuff. So like, how long did it take, do you think, for you to like see results where you're like, right, this is actually paying off, or like I'm getting stronger, or I feel a bit more like muscular?
Yeah, like I mean, like initially, like in those first few years, I would have gotten somewhat okay results because I was still being consistent, and like the main kind of thing, even though I wasn't necessarily training intelligently, is like I was training hard. Like anytime I go to the gym, like whether it's the best approach or not, but I was pushing pretty much close to failure, like on like most exercises most of the time, right? So I think like if you're gonna have a scenario where you're starting off in a gym and you're doing that versus the opposite side, you're probably gonna get more results kind of with the more kind of extreme approach. So like that was something that like definitely helped in my early years. But as I mentioned, like I didn't have much of a reins on like the diet front. And like my sleep definitely in college was probably not the best, as typical, like staying up until like 2 or 3 in the morning watching Netflix kind of thing and waking up God knows what hour. But because it's probably spent so long not really thinking about my abs or dieting, when the time came and I was like, all right, I'm going to download this MyFitnessPal thing and try to like track macros. That was the kind of time when a lot of stuff was like kind of revealed, and when people start to like, you can have muscle, but if it's clouded by a lot of body fat, people will just be like, he's a big lad, But then when you start to kind of reveal the muscle that is underlying there, people are like, geez, he must know his stuff. Like, even though I may not have known much at all at the time, right? But people see, the lean physique, and they're like, that guy probably knows his stuff. Should probably ask him a few questions, So that was, I think, the first time I ever dieted was maybe 2014. Is actually prior to going to a J1, because that was the main motivator for me to get in shape. going away to California, like California girls and all that. So like and then that proceeded going on my Erasmus for a year, where again, spent a lot of time soul searching as what I was going to do post college. So yeah, that was kind of the start of kind of starting to see kind of tangible results and kind of finding out like how I should actually think about planning out like my years for progress versus like just turning up to the gym and hoping for the best. I think that like those kind of initial diet cycles kind of gave me some kind of ideas. So like if I do kind of want to make progress over the long term, I should probably plan out things a little bit more in terms of kind of phases, as opposed to just winging it and hoping that eventually I'll see something.
Yeah, just kind of hitting and hoping type of thing. It's cool actually. It's like you're saying that the gym gave you a bit of structure in your life, and then once you kind of got accustomed to working out for a while, then you started putting a bit of structure to how you're actually approaching the gym and stuff, and then you started seeing more results. So it starts like it snowballs over time, which is really good to see. With the fat loss that you were seeing then, how important do you think it is, just like with any fat loss goal, to have like an actual bigger goal attached to it? So you're like, right, I'm going to J1 or I'm traveling. Like, do you think, let's just say you didn't have a show right now, do you think you'd be able to get as lean just like purely by force of will, by deciding? Or do you need that like bigger goal? The clients need it as well to really like make a significant change when it comes to fat loss?
I think so, because like it kind of gives, like, the way I kind of put it to clients is like, this is not your end destination, but this is more a checkpoint for you, a checkpoint along your kind of training journey. Because like ideally, right, by the end of the time you finish it out. You're not going to just stop. Okay, but it's going to provide a kind of nice stop off place for you that we can plan out the actual diet, and it kind of forces you to try to be a bit more kind of diligent throughout the weeks. So if somebody is like, I want to lose 5 kilos, and like, how long by what date or whatever, and like, I don't know, I just want to lose 5 kilos. Throughout those weeks, they can be really consistent for maybe a few, and then some other ones they're not consistent at all because they don't have that kind of like deadline to kind of put them under pressure. And then as a coach as well, you can almost be like, oh yeah, well, like, fat is coming off, like, like, it's okay if you slow things down a little bit. But if you say that, I want to lose 5 kilos in 12 weeks, then I say, okay, these 12 weeks, these are the only 12 weeks that you will have to, implement these lower calories, higher step counts, whatever it may be, whatever it takes for you to get to the goal. And then after that, we can go into a more kind of flexible phase, right? But if you can commit to like the next 12 weeks, you'll see the results, and then you can go into a bit more kind of like free ocean swimming. That's going to be a lot more enjoyable for the person versus like, people could spend 6 months like trying to lose 5 kilos because they don't have that clear cut date. And like, I certainly could not get into bodybuilding shape if I had no show plan. If it was just like diet until, whenever, because as well, like the timeline dictates your rate of loss. So like if you are trying to set up somebody's calories, if you like, again, if you're looking to lose 5 kilos in 12 weeks, you say, okay, well, 5 kilos, like, kilos, 7,700 calories or whatever like that. Let's stratify that over the course of the next 5 weeks. Let's plan your calories around that and assess your kind of rate of loss that you're going to have. Versus if it's just like, I want to lose 5 kilos whenever, it's like, well, do you want to go hard? Do you want to go fast? Do you want to go slow? And then some people be like, oh, I want to go slow because I want to be a bit more sustainable. But then the slow and sustainable becomes very boring for them in terms of progress. They lack kind of discipline to the overall plan, even though it's like slower and sustainable and more flexible. So like I do think it is kind of best if you do have these kind of things planned out in phases. And like for the most part, like people should not be spending all of their time in a fat loss phase. Like a fat loss phase is it's meant to be a temporary short-term restriction of calories, and I suppose short-term restriction of like living life how you should be living life, right? It shouldn't be something that you're like permanently in. So if you can just like commit to like your goal for a certain like short-term period of the year, like, the food, the flexibility, it's always going to be there after the fact. So it's just kind of a case of just committing and like thinking about what you want in the long term versus like maybe what you want like in 3 weeks time when push comes to shove.
Yeah. It feels like it adds more structure again to what you're doing. So it's like, right, this is, the start point, week 1, this is the finish point, week, 6, week 10, week 12, whatever it is. And it kind of guides you then, because otherwise you have too much flexibility, you have too much rope essentially, and things don't have any kind of meaning or any urgency, like you said.
Yeah, it's kind of like telling people to just track macros with like no guidance on that, because like if like you tell somebody tomorrow that has no idea about like how to build a sustainable nutrition plan or how to have a good diet from a health standpoint, just say just track your macros, just fill these 3 numbers. Like I've done it before. Like you can go to a shop and like fill your macros up with like shite, like protein bars, like just like protein milks, whey, like loads of like hyper processed stuff that like, yes, you may hit your macros, but like over the long term, it's not a good approach, whereas like if you say track your macros, but within that, we want you to hit like, protein from these type of sources, fiber from these type of sources, fats from these type of sources, limit this, limit that. Like, that kind of makes it a lot easier for that person to then have a more sustainable approach while maybe having some flexibility in there. And like that person probably going to be more better off than the person who has all the flexibility. Because like, you have that like the paradox of choice, right? And like if you have too many options, you're probably gonna pick like ones that are like either way too easy or the most obvious one, and like sometimes they're just not the best choices, especially like most supermarkets these days. The fruit and veg aisle and like the meat aisles, like they're the smallest ones, and everything else is like packed out to bits with stuff that you should definitely be having in moderation.
Just you have too much choice, really. Yeah, when there's no timeline on it, it's just kind of like, where do you go, like, and why are you making this decision? Whereas you cut it down with a timeline, and it just gives you such a strong indication of what way you should be leaning. So yeah, so just kind of going back into like your training, you've done a lot of powerlifting shows, so like, or competitions or meets. You can decide how you phrase them, but how many have you done, and like, what are kind of some of your numbers with like, the squat, bench, and deadlift?
So I have competed in 6 powerlifting shows so far, and my best squat is 252.5 kilos, bench 160, and then deadlift is 287.5. So the nice round 700 kilo total. So very proud of that. But yeah, that's the result of, I suppose, the last like 3 years of committing to powerlifting training, and then obviously like the training preceding that wouldn't have been powerlifting specific, but it still would have been doing SBD in some framework. But like 3 years of specific powerlifting training with a club, with a coach, like kind of got me into that position, thankfully.
Yeah, they're very impressive numbers. So were you always strong, say from your first time doing squat, bench, and deadlift, or did you see like a huge improvement when you started kind of upping the intensity?
I like most kind of teenagers, I probably focused a little bit too much on my upper body when I got into the gym. I vaguely have memories of doing drop sets of we used to work up to a max, like a one rep max, and then once we did that, literally as soon as we racked the bar, we'd take off some plates and then just AMRAP until you got to the bar. So I think the best of training approaches, but like I wasn't like, I had some lifts that were always like somewhat decent. Like my deadlift, like I think when I was in 6th year, I could deadlift 170, which is okay for like an 18-year-old. I think I could bench 120 at the time as well. Funny that the rate of progress on bench has been so slow over those 10 years. But yeah, so once I started like training them quite specifically, I did see like quite rapid increase in growth. Like, I mean, like the way I kind of will talk to some of my clients is like, they may get like a bit kind of like in their head about like, oh, my numbers aren't like this, that, and the other, or these numbers are probably nothing to you. And like, I have to remind them that like, I was in their position before. Like I was also had to start from somewhere. Like I think initially when I was started to train to squat like twice a week, I was like squatting like 120, and now like I'd be doing like 200 for sets now. But that's taken like 10 years or more, and it's not like an overnight change. So like I wouldn't say I wasn't. I don't think my kind of progress has been anything significant in the time span that I've been training. Like if you train for anything for a long period of time, you're going to get good at it. So it's just kind of a matter of not really thinking too much about the gap between you and the next person, but really just kind of focusing on the kind of end outcomes of your training blocks and kind of where you are, and like looking at the relative change. Like one thing that I hate, right? Because obviously I'm a natty elitist, right? And I hate the natty or not debate. And one thing that people always kind of like play up is like, looking at people who are like at the elite level, and they're like, oh, they can't not be on drugs. But like generally, if you look at a lot of people who are at the high level, if you look at their like relative rate of progression versus other people, like percentage wise, they're like progressing at a pretty normal rate. It's just, their relative percentage is a lot higher than other people's.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you're making me think of my running that I'm doing, and like my half marathon time that I'm shooting for next time out. I know only from training like with weights and stuff that like, so I'm aiming for like 5% improvement in time, and I'm like, that's not really like that exciting or whatever, but I'm like, yeah, but that's like 5% improvement. Like that's huge. Like that. If I keep making 5%, like at regular intervals, you know, like you did over your 10 years or, you know, whatever time it was, you know, that really compounds. Like, you know, if you look back, it really adds up. Like, so yeah, that comparison it's like the surest way to demotivate yourself and sort of just get off track. Like you could be motivated and see someone else's numbers and just completely be deflated and just be like, oh, sure, I'm not that strong.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. Like even like thinking back to even when I was like when I started working as a PT, right? And at that time, I was hitting some numbers then that I was like, I never thought I'd be able to do this, right? Like literally never thought I'd be able to do it. And like the numbers I'm hitting now, I'm like, I never thought I'd be able to do it either, you know? So it's like a lot of it, like as you know, would come from like the kind of belief that you can achieve more comes when you accomplish things that you previously thought that you couldn't, right? And that's kind of one thing I tried to like get my clients to like think about more is like, you know, start believing in yourself. Like since starting like strength training and taking it seriously, like my mindset is like if that guy can do it, like why can't I? Why can't if I over time like continue doing what I'm doing, where it takes me 5 or 10 years, why can't I be lifting the same weights that he's lifting? You know, but that only really happens when you start to think of yourself in a higher way and think that you can achieve those kind of greater things. Like, you know, setting goals like, you know, 2 times bodyweight squat, 1.5 times bodyweight squat, or like 1 time bodyweight bench. You take that off and then you do that and you're like, wow, that was class. What's next? Like, you know, the next increment. And like, you know, over time, you just continually start like racking up these accomplishments, and you'll start to kind of realize that, like, you know, there's nothing really kind of that's differentiating you from like the person who's in front of you, other than potentially a time component. Obviously, genetics playing in there, but like time is probably one of it is like the greatest like factor in most people's progress, but it's also going to be something that is going to detract from a lot of people's consistency, because some people see that kind of time component and they will think of it as, you know, it's like, oh, that's so much work to get there, you know. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and like the person who was on it was saying that, like, you know, some people will view like even like a hill like in 2 different ways. Some people will, like, you know, look all the way to the top, and some people look at, like, you know, the next few steps in front of them, or like some people see the same hill as, like, you know, different like actual kind of inclines. Like some people see it as like lower, some people see it as higher, and then that kind of affects how like people will apply themselves in it. Like one thing I actually do when it comes to like trying to get my steps in now in prep is like I do just look at the ground. I don't really look up. Like, you know, thankfully I don't bump into people too much. But the reason I do that is because it just helps you kind of focus on like what's in front of me, and helps me focus on the process versus, you know, seeing how far I have to go. You know, because like, yeah, if you start comparing yourself or thinking about the time it's going to take you to actually kind of achieve something, you know, it's kind of demotivate you in a sense. And another great quote that I heard is like, you know, don't be afraid to kind of put in the work for the time that's going to take you, because that time's going to pass you by anyway. So may as well do it.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's kind of like only lift your head to look up and see how far you have to go when you need to, type of thing. Don't be checking, you know, too far, because that will take you off track. And yeah, I feel like it was someone like Gary Vee that I heard say that quote of like, the time's going to pass anyway, you know. But I think the most important thing about motivation is like finding what motivates you. So that's just like a kind of an individual thing. And like, I think seeing the numbers as well, especially when it comes to lifting heavy and powerlifting, is a big motivator. So just like, you know, you've done 6 meets, like what kind of kept you going to do like 5 more after you did the first one? Did you like really enjoy lifting heavy, or was there something else to it that like kept you going?
It's just really fun. It was like my first powerlifting competition. I did the abs. I think it was it was the first abs pro weekend. No, it was the second abs pro weekend in like 2019. And I just joined abs. So abs powerlifting based in Dublin. And yeah, like the setup of the actual venue was class. There was like tons of people there watching. And like, you know, I was competing with a lot of people who were like, you know, entry level lifters like myself as well. So that was nice to be competing with people who maybe have only done one competition before, or were only starting off themselves. So it kind of gave me kind of like an even playing field as such. But like even like the lead up to the competition, like, I was training in the gym, in the powerlifting gym specifically, like maybe 2-3 times per week. And then in the gym I was working in as well. But like the training sessions that I was doing in the actual powerlifting gym, like, while powerlifting for the outside perspective, it's an individual sport. You're just up there lifting by yourself. But there's a huge kind of team and community aspect to it as well. So like, we'd have our Sunday training sessions. So if you were invited to be part of the 9 a.m. club, that was kind of seen as like a badge of honor. So I was allowed to do that. And that kind of training environment, I was training around a lot of people who were much stronger than me, which also kind of helped with training progression, right? Because like if you're training with people who are stronger than you, you're seeing that somebody else is already able to do what you want to do. And as well, you're able to learn from them, like what do they do that makes them so strong? What's the difference between the two is? But as well, like, if you're training with somebody who's like, warming up with like the weights that you are doing your working sets on, your tough working sets on, that almost like mentally makes the weight that you're doing less challenging, because I don't know how to describe it, but when you see somebody like just like repping out like your 1RM, you kind of disassociate like yourself from the weight, and you're just like, this is just a heavy object. I'm either going to lift it or not, or I'm not. And it kind of gives you a little bit more confidence when you're going up to it, because you're already after seeing somebody else doing it. So you kind of go in with the belief that like, I'd probably be able to give this a crack. But anyway, off on a tangent here, but what kept bringing me back to powerlifting? So obviously that community aspect did help. But then as well, like the actual vibe at powerlifting competitions is like, it's weird, right? Because like, again, it's an individualistic sport. People are there from other clubs. People are there who are not from other clubs, but everybody's so welcoming. Like even if they're from a rival club, like everybody's there to help each other out, cheer everybody on. Like even like the person who's behind you in placings is kind of like be there cheering you on for your last deadlift. And one thing I really do enjoy about it is like, it doesn't matter where you are in the totem pole, you get your opportunity to perform in front of everybody. So like whether you're squatting 60 kilos or 400 kilos, you get your minute on the platform. And, if you are going into your third attempt deadlift, everybody's going to be on their feet and like, cheering you on. Or like if you're about to bomb out of a meet. So if you're bombing out of a meet, essentially is like if you miss, if you don't make a lift, like say for example, if you have 3 squat attempts and you miss 2, if you miss the third one, you bomb out of competition and you can't complete the rest. And this can happen. You can make all your squats on the bench, but then by the time you get to your deadlift, if you don't make any of your deadlifts, you still bomb out of the meet, so you don't get a total count for it. But like if you're on your third squat and you're about to bomb out, like everybody is gonna get behind you. Like I was at powerlifting competition at the weekend, and like it happened on a few occasions, people, and like everybody in the entire building, like even like the MC commentator there would be like, kind of getting everybody riled up to kind of help you pass that lift. So I really did enjoy that kind of element to it. And then I suppose it's the ultimate proving ground for your training to date, right? Because like you're being judged to hit these lifts for a certain standard. And if you can do that on the platform with decent judging, you can walk away being like, I definitely lifted that weight. Like, everybody knows the person in the gym who is like, oh yeah, I could bench 180 there, and you see them fucking doing like a quarter inch downward movement of the bar with their arse coming up off the bench, and their friend holding the bar for that quarter inch. So like, there's none of that on the powerlifting platform. And then from there as well, I suppose obviously unlike bodybuilding, I'm doing at the moment, powerlifting it's much less restrictive in this nature, right? You can do multiple powerlifting competitions every year, and a lot of it is centered around training. It's very process oriented, right? And because of that, and because like you have these continual check off points along the way of your actual meet progression, and kind of seeing those numbers trend up, you're able to essentially focus more on the process than the outcome. Essentially, like obviously the outcome like happens on the meet day, but like the whole kind of journey up to that point is just heavily focused on the training. And again, I would encourage anybody who's getting into strength training in their first like 6 months of lifting, if they're enjoying doing squat, bench, deadlift, enter into a powerlifting competition. You know, it is a great environment to get into. The community, and this is not just in Ireland, but I've been told it's the world over. It's the exact same. Everybody's very welcoming, very, very supportive, and you might just enjoy it.
Yeah, I can attest to that completely. I was up in Abs doing a meet, and that is literally my experience. Everything you've described. So I went up there, didn't know anyone. You'd see a few people on social media, and I met this fella. He was taking pictures of all of my lifts. Ended up giving me a lift home. Everyone's cheering each other, and even backstage, it was the sense of anticipation. You could feel it, and it was like nothing else. It was like the adrenaline's going. Everyone is there. We're just trying to get better, just trying to be as strong as we can, and it's just it's almost addictive, I would say. So I can see how you could do 6 of them, and I always was thinking I want to do another, do one more at least. So yeah, I would echo everything you said there. Definitely, if you like squat, bench, deadlift, if you like lifting heavy, give it a go. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain, really.
Yeah. I've met so many friends through the sport over the years. Prior to doing powerlifting, I didn't have many lifting friends. A lot of my friends, they're just not really that interested in the gym, and that's almost the reason why I kind of wanted to get into it, because if there's one thing that's going to keep you coming back to the gym, it's having a community. And if you can show up to the gym and have a chat with people, and look forward to your training sessions that way as well, that's one way to keep you in the gym. I don't like training in commercial gyms. There's time I do, there's times now, for example, now that I'm on prep and I just want to get in, do my session and get out. I get it, headphones in, I don't necessarily want to be talking to too many people, but in general, if you can have that kind of atmosphere to go to the gym and kind of make gains in that way, that's why classes in gyms are so popular, right? My mom goes, is mad for the gym, mad for exercise, but she much prefers going to the classes because all her friends are there. It's a social thing, and obviously that's going to be very good for you as you age. If you can't, especially if competition aspirations have died down, you don't have as many friends. Maybe they're dropping like flies, or can't lift for whatever reason. Being able to get involved in some kind of community atmosphere like that is great. And in the club, there's a lot of master powerlifters, like women and men in their 50s and 60s who are still in there training, putting in the work. And I'm sure a lot of that is down to health, obviously, but there's a community aspect there. They're a valued member of the club.
Yeah, the community aspect, you can't understate it. So if you can find extra motivation for working out through your friends or just a group of people, that'll carry you so far, especially on the days where community is so important. It'll carry you through the days where you're just not feeling it, or the days when you actually have a good lift, for example, in powerlifting. If you have somebody to celebrate with, that's what it's all about. You're not going to be celebrating on your own, really. It carries you, through the tough times and helps you celebrate the good moments. But bring it back to what you're doing currently. So Shane, you're prepping for a bodybuilding show. Talk a little bit about the switch from your training style, nutrition and stuff, from powerlifting now to bodybuilding, and just how it feels to be. I think you're 4 weeks out, is it? So how does that feel?
It's actually a little bit better now, weirdly, right? Because for the last 2 months I was over in Spain, and we kind of went over there initially, so my girlfriend is doing the prep as well, and we kind of went over there to kind of get away from Ireland for the summer, getting some nice weather. The heat actually made it probably more difficult. I found the last week since being home a lot easier in terms of prepping, because going out for steps when you were not coming back drenched in sweat and having to take three showers a day and train in 30-degree heat, it's not as fun as it sounds. But I suppose over the last, so I've been prepping since March. So I competed in my last powerlifting competition in March of this year, and that was nationals. So the decision to make the switch essentially was like my girlfriend, she's been prepping for this for like the last like 2 years essentially for like, the bodybuilding shows. And I said, I do the prep with her, but I had to hit 700 kilo total and I had to qualify for nationals. And that they were like the two goals. I was like, I'm not making the change from powerlifting until I do that. The reason for it being is like, just like there's no like prerequisite you need to do bodybuilding. But, I said to myself, if I got to that level, I'd probably have a decent amount of muscle where I could probably show up on stage and not be laughed at, right? So that was the decision. I hit the total. I reached out to Team 3DMJ and I started getting coaching with them. So the main kind of changes to my training and nutrition. So initially nutrition was the biggest change, right? So I was eating a comfortable 3,800 to 4,000 calories a day when I was doing powerlifting. Very flexible, like going out for meals, that kind of thing. It wasn't like I was tracking, but I was mainly tracking protein and calories. Wasn't really tracking to the gram with carbs and fats. And then once prep started, I got those cut down. Not too much. I think it was like 3,300. I started off with 3,300, and now I'm on 2,300. So there's been a 1,000 calorie drop over like the last 6 months, but it's been gradual, right? So it's been like I think I've had like 4 or 5 calorie drops since the initial one. So it's been pretty steady. Like, adjusting to portion sizes has been fine. Thankfully, because I've been doing this thing for so long, I've done so many diet phases. I've made all the mistakes there are to make. And through that entire process, I've learned how to kind of set up my diet in a way that's going to promote a lot of like good satiety throughout the day, have me with good energy, have me train well, have me retain muscle, that kind of thing. So definitely like the prior diet experience definitely paid huge dividends, I would say, because like based off like even talking to my coach and hearing about other people's prep experiences, like some of them sound rough. I'm still kind of waiting for things to actually start suffering because like 4 weeks out now, I would kind of expect me to be feeling a lot worse. Like I do have times throughout the day where I don't have much energy, and some training sessions are not as fun as they used to be. Like my sex drive has disappeared. So like there's definitely like some things that are like downsides to it, but I would say it's been more than a manageable experience so far. And then like from like that's on like the nutrition front. On the training front, it's been a little bit, I'd say, tougher psychologically, because I've had to remove myself from like the more kind of numbers based mindset and kind of moving away from A to B, which I was doing with powerlifting, to trying to keep things kind of muscle centric. So like initially when we were transitioning away from powerlifting, up until I went to Spain, so that was up until June. So between March to June, I was still running pretty much a powerlifting style training program. I was still squatting twice per week, still deadlifting like 2-3 times per week, still benching like 3 to 4 times per week, and I was still incorporating like heavy singles, mainly because I was stubborn, right? So I just didn't want to let go of that strength. I was just terrified that it would go. But then like once I actually left Ireland and I left like training in the powerlifting gym, like I could take a little bit of a backseat to the powerlifting mindset and change my program up a little bit to be a bit more kind of bodybuilding centric. So I still like squatting and deadlifting, but the focus was just slightly different. I was more kind of focused on body parts, more so focused on moving loads with a bit more intent versus just moving them from A to B. And like the singles went, so thankfully, because they were starting to trend downwards. And then in like the last like week or two, I've kind of started to pretty much take out a lot of the power lifts. So I'm only squatting once a week now, only deadlifting once a week now, not benching at all, mainly for reasons that are like the power lifts to a certain degree, they just, when you're at my kind of level of body fat at the moment, just don't have a great like stimulus to fatigue ratio. A lot. I was still kind of going in with some kind of numbers focused approach to them in a sense. So I was trying to hang on to numbers that I shouldn't have been trying to hang on to. And after the sessions and after those exercises, I was like either dreading going in to do them, or I was just feeling like immensely fatigued after doing the actual session, versus like even in the last week from taking them out, I felt like I've gotten way more effective training sessions, but I haven't been feeling as beat up. And that's like, you know, 4 weeks out from the bodybuilding show, you would think every session I feel like ass after, but I feel much better even from a psychological point of view, because I'm not going in with the pressure of, oh, how's this going to feel? And kind of attaching my performance on that day to my performance when I was 93 kilos and performing at my best.
Yeah, so it sounds like a pretty significant shift, like mentally as well. So like to let go of your numbers and not have that HB approach. So was there like a lot of coaching that sort of like helped you to make that shift, or were you able to do a lot of that like on your own as you saw that like the powerlifting wasn't necessarily as effective for the bodybuilding?
Yeah, to be honest, like Brad was Brad is pretty like keen for me to kind of have a lot of the kind of control over the training, because he's very much concerned that, like, you know, I'm consistent and I'm getting my volume takes off, and how I want to do that up to a point is kind of like is down to me, right? Because like obviously my adherence and enjoyment of training is going to be key, and like that's like adherence and enjoyment doesn't matter if you're a beginner or advanced, you know, that's just going to be like one of the make or break factors of your training. So it was up until I started to find that, you know, the powerlifts just were not as enjoyable as they once were. And then as well, I just had to remember, you know, it's not the goal at the moment. You know, powerlifting is going to be there after my bodybuilding competition. It's not going anywhere fast. And like, I think like personally, it was a little bit hard to let go, right? Because like you feel like you're kind of losing a little bit of your identity when you do let go of it. And there's also the kind of fear that like, I'm stopping doing it now and it's going to take me so long to get back to my old strength levels. Like, but like what it's harder to learn a new skill than it is to like relearn one that you've had. And when you've been training for so long, you kind of do realize that like there is going to be a lot of kind of setbacks throughout your kind of training journey. But like once you just don't stop, like you're going to get back to where you want to be. And like one thing that kind of gives me comfort as well is like there's plenty of people who've been in the exact same position as me. You know, there's plenty of people who've done powerlifting and bodybuilding, and after bodybuilding have went on to do even better in their powerlifting journey. You know, so again, it kind of comes back to that kind of checkpoint versus end destination kind of thing that I talked about at the start. Because yeah, it's like ultimately, I would have been more. Future me would be way more disappointed if I decided to not do this because I couldn't let go of powerlifting. Versus like now when I look back in a year's time and I'm like, damn, I went through bodybuilding prep. It's meant to be one of the hardest things that you can do. I'll be very happy with like the kind of approach and kind of efforts I put forward during that, and then obviously all the kind of lessons that would have learned through this process and how that can help me help my clients in the future as well.
It'll be interesting to compare how you feel about bodybuilding once you've got it done. We'll fast forward about 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever. And it's interesting. It's like in the last podcast we were saying food will always be there, right? And it's kind of like powerlifting will always be there too. Like, you know, you've already pretty much, I don't want to say mastered it, but you've done very well in it. Like, so you have that skill there. Whenever you want to tap into it again, you come back to it. But right now it's like you're trying to, instead of be as strong as you can, you're trying to look as muscular as you can. And, you know, you're flying it. So that's really good. And just, you talked a little bit about kind of like some of the side effects, like your libido and your energy. And will you just talk a little bit about that? Just because I hear like a lot of clients are like, I want to get 6-pack abs, or I want to be like, I don't know, you know, you see some people, they want to do like crazy transformations, and that's great. Like, you should definitely want to better yourself, but I don't think they realize like the sacrifice you have to make to get like very lean, or the changes in your life that come about. And obviously there's a lot of good stuff, but just to kind of the side effects. So to just talk a little bit about the reality of being very lean.
Yeah, like being lean, like it looks great, right? Like, but that's about all it really does. All right, like for most people, unless you have a really low body fat set point, like your body doesn't really want to be there. Like everything kind of starts to down regulate. Like one thing I mentioned there is like sex drive, like just plummets, right? Because like once energy availability goes low, then, you know, that's one of the first things kind of get shut off, right? Reproduction is not like important right now. You need to go find some food. And then, like, a lot of people who want to get really, really lean, well, a lot of them are motivated by sex, and then they get really lean and they can't have sex. They don't want to have sex. They just think about food. That's all they want. And then as well with that as well, if you are not getting coached well through the actual process, you can really fuck yourself up by, apologies if I can't curse, but you can really mess yourself up by getting really lean, right? Because like one of the kind of consequences that comes with it is like, depending on how you're doing it, if you're doing it in a very, very restrictive manner, like you could end up like giving yourself like serious like eating issues and like really like really negatively impacting your relationship with food. Because like one thing that like is like very often talked about in like the bodybuilding scene, and I'm yet to go through it, is like the post-show period. And like I've done many diets in the past, and I can tell you, like, from getting really lean and coming out of that kind of post-diet experience, it's very tough mentally to see yourself change back to where your body naturally wants to hang out with, like in terms of body fat. But it's also very tough to kind of see how your behaviors go in terms of food, because you go from this like really disciplined kind of mindset around food, and then you get to your end goal, and then you go into kind of free ocean swimming. And if you don't have any kind of coaching around that, that could mean like, burger and chips and pizzas like multiple times a week. Like, I remember like getting really, really lean before, and like, God, I'd go into the shop and buy like a box of Cocoa Pops, finish the entire thing, maybe get a bag of cookies as well, finish the entire thing. And like, you feel awful because like, obviously you've satisfied some kind of craving, but then like you look at yourself in the mirror, you look all bloated, you look all watery, you think, oh, this all the work I've done is ruined. Whereas like, to get to that position, and like, especially if you don't have any support through it, it can be very tough, because you can fall into the kind of then more of a binge restrict cycle, where like you're trying to maintain the lean physique you have, but maintaining that lean physique is causing you to be way too restrictive. You feel you're being too restrictive, and then you end up being like, I'll just have one pizza, and then you end up like ordering everything from Domino's, and then like you do that all over and over again. And then what ends up happening is you end up having a very poor relationship with your body and your food, but then also you will probably end up looking much worse over time as well, because like you're probably going to exceed the rate of kind of healthy regain of body fat that you're going to get per week, versus if you kind of took a little bit less of an aggressive approach, like, kind of settled for something that is not too extreme in terms of body fat levels. Like, I think for most people, like 10% is like more than lean, like more like lean enough, like for most people to get to, right? Like anything sub 10, like nothing good really comes from that, okay, unless it's going to be short term. But getting the 10%, getting somewhat visible abs, like that's like achievable and semi maintainable for a lot of people. But I can tell you now, if somebody who's been at both kind of ends of the spectrum of being like 98 kilos like two years ago, when I was at like peak bulk, and like now when I'm 80 kilos, like I can tell you that like I was happier when I was like in the kind of mid 90s. Like life was way easier, less restrictive. I could go out for food with my friends, go out for nights out with my friends. I could, have good training sessions. I could, go to the bedroom with my partner. There's lots of kind of benefits that came from it that people take for granted when they are kind of living a more kind of healthy body fat range. Like, yes, like it does it look cool? Does it look cool to get some pictures for the gram, or like is it a worthy pursuit to put yourself through the actual kind of diet, like a hard diet and phase, to see what you can achieve when you put your mind to it? Like, for sure, but like I just wouldn't see it as like the pinnacle as to what somebody should really be striving for.
Yeah, it's definitely a good experience to go through, and it's not without its side effects. And it makes me think, as a general rule, like if there's like a position stand from like some sort of agency within the health and fitness industry, to be like, it's recommended when you get below like X body fat level that, when you're going for a prolonged diet phase, you get a coach or you get an experienced confidant who can give you a little bit of assistance. Because like, yeah, your hunger, drive, and stuff like that can really mess with your mindset and kind of like get you to, get into that binge restrict cycle, which is terrible to be in. Like, it's really a challenge, and um, you can definitely avoid it if you have a little bit of support. So definitely something to keep in mind. And just something else as well in terms of being lean and training, and the squat, bench, and deadlift when you're lean, so they feel totally different. Can you just talk a little bit about, how does it feel on your body to do the squat, bench, and deadlift, lifting heavy, and just kind of like navigating injuries and aches and pains in general?
Yeah, I think like the one that most people are gonna find is like the first to go, and the worst is gonna be the bench press. Hence why I'm not doing it at the moment. Like few reasons, I suppose. Like, well, number one, you're gonna just be like, there's less human that's gonna be taking up space on that bench, right? So you got less of a base support, which you have a heavy barbell resting over. It's a little bit harder to kind of get a kind of very solid arch as well in place, in my experience at least. The range of motions increase. Like, so with the arch there, for example, you start losing like a lot of body fat around your arse. Like, that's going to decrease the size of the arch that you're going to have there to create more stability through the upper back. Now, again, more body fat coming from the upper back, more body fat coming from the chest, it's going to be an increase ROM there, right? So the ROM where you usually would have been training through, that's like fine. You're kind of adapted to that kind of specific ROM.
Diet brain kicking in here.
You're adapted to that specific ROM, right? But then, like, as you start to gain those extra like few centimeters or millimeters, even like, those kind of last few millimeters may not be, and then maybe you're putting more kind of force through like more passive structures that haven't been accustomed to that load, and they're through that, because you were exceeding the load tolerance of those areas, maybe a little bit more kind of aches and pains start to pop up. And then as well, just this stability like issue again, like, if you are trying to stabilize a heavy load coming down over your chest, and you're kind of bracing and your arch is not as good, like, it's generally just not going to feel as secure as something like using like a machine chest press, for example, where, you can relatively easily like kind of fail a weight there, like, and you're not going to like decapitate yourself or anything. And you can potentially get yourself a little bit more kind of stable and locked in, and you probably won't be as attached to the numbers that you're using on a selectorized machine or a plate load machine versus when you are using a barbell bench.
Yeah, so it's all about the joint angles that completely changes, and you're making me think that I should start a big bulk just to get my numbers up so that I have better angles and stuff. But following on from this, a recent debate that was going on is Kevin Bass. He put up a post. He's like, the squat and deadlift are dangerous specialist lifts. They should not be used by most people. And I thought it was a very interesting debate, and I had my own opinions about it. But yeah, what are your thoughts on most people doing we'll just say the big three, right? What are your thoughts on that debate?
Yeah, it's an interesting debate. Like, to be honest, after the initial few posts, I just kind of clocked out because it seemed like he was like just trying to be contrarian and just get on people's nerves. But like, look, for the most part, like, they are three of the most common lifts that people are going to do in the gym, right? So just by sheer virtue of being three of the most common exercises performed by most people in the gym, they're probably going to have a higher rate of people getting injured from them, right? Because like there's a whole sport centered around the actual thing themselves. People are going to see that, and they're like, right, I'll go in and try these exercises. And if they go in without prior training experience, like, if they try to load up a bar, like, and are performing things with like techniques that are like, again, exceeding their kind of load tolerance for those days, then yeah, sure, they could get themselves injured. A lot of people do go into the gym and train with poor training practices, right? A lot of people go in and will like just go in and max out, or they'll go in and do like, AMRAP sets like I used to do. And like, some are going to be lucky, some are going to be not so lucky, right? And then all of a sudden, and I've seen it with clients before, like, they start to blame like a specific exercise, but like, who's to say if we didn't have like three different exercises, right? So I know he put forward some other like exercises like split squats or like, you know, trap bar deadlifts, and I forget like other ones. But like, who's to say if they weren't the most commonly performed exercises in the gym, that there wouldn't be a ton of injuries from them, you know? Because at the same time, it just comes back to like the like how much load can your kind of joints kind of tolerate, and how much kind of training stress can they tolerate over a given period of time. And then we also have to factor in, it's not just your training. Like, you know, we know that like outside variables like account for pain. Like, you know, if you have a higher stress day, if you poor night's sleep, if you poor hydration, poor nutrition, like, you know, all of that can factor into your recovery status and your training performance capabilities on any given day. So, you know, again, if we have that, if we have like issues like that, which a lot of people do deal with a lot of those issues, and not everybody has them perfect. And we are talking about like three most common exercises that are performed in gyms all over the place. Like yeah, there may be slightly higher injury risks, but is it the exercise themselves, or is it other factors? Like, you know, because like, again, like if we just take the example of like the split squat and the hex bar deadlift, like there's not a huge amount of difference in terms of like, you know, joint angles between a hex bar deadlift and a regular deadlift, you know, and that's going to vary depending on somebody's structure as well. Some people, when they perform a hex bar deadlift, are going to be a lot more upright. Some are going to have a bit more of a hinge in their hips. The split squat, some people are going to have their knees go way further over their toes than other people's. And so like that's, again, going to bias, like, you know, different muscle groups, kind of bias different tendons that are being used. So like, you know, there's so much kind of variability within those kind of things that it's very hard to say that like, oh, it's those exercises specifically. And like, obviously, right, people are always going to be clouded by their own biases. So like, you know, I'm a powerlifter, so like obviously I'm going to be like rooting for the squat, bench, and deadlift. But a lot of my clients, I don't necessarily do those exercises. Like, I don't, like if they don't want to do those exercises, I won't get them to do it. If they've had a bad experience with a deadlift before, I'm probably not going to program them deadlifts unless they ask me to. Like, I'm not going to like force them to do a deadlift and just try to be like, oh well, we shouldn't be catastrophizing, or like, you know, like fear mongering around this lift. Like, you know, you should expose yourself to it. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. You know, there's other exercises that they can surely progress in their goals with. And again, like, yeah, personal experience, you know, if somebody's injured themselves with it, of course they're going to be like, well, you know, this is a bad exercise, especially if it happens repeatedly. But we know that one of the most common indicators of if you get injured is if you've been injured before. So, you know, if you do the same silly things over and over again, you may get injured, you know?
Yeah, it's like what your own coach said about like enjoyment. That's like the biggest thing. So if you enjoy doing these exercises, of course you should do them, but just be mindful of the fact that, like, you know, maybe you need to really pay attention to the weight you're lifting, your technique and stuff, and you can definitely do it in a safe way. And I think that's terrible advice, that any exercise is dangerous, because, you know, most people don't exercise enough. So this kind of fear mongering is just a terrible look. But that debate is put to bed, I hope. But Shane, thanks very much for your time. It's been really, really good talking to you. Is there anything you want to mention before we wrap up? Any messages or plans you have coming up?
No problem, Ross. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been an honor. It's a good conversation. Yeah, so I suppose like if you want to follow more of my content, I am documenting my prep process on YouTube. So you just search my name, Shane Storey. I should pop up there. The series running Powerlifter to Bodybuilder. Who knows what's going to happen after the bodybuilding takes place, but we'll see after it ends. But yeah, you can follow me there. You can follow me on Instagram at sstory94. And then yeah, if you have any questions for me following the podcast, just drop me a DM on Instagram. I'm pretty open to answering people's questions.
Yeah, and very knowledgeable. So best of luck with the prep, Shane, and thanks very much for coming on.